Most of our learning should be a panacea. It should be safe in Eretz Yisrael. Everyone should have a first lema. We're going to start Lamed Beis.
Collected a lot of money, and they're going to control the Rama because the army police aren't doing it. And so they're volunteering to go into these hotspots that no one wants to go into.
So because he was in the army before.
So he has a license to count.
Crazy. Okay. Tanur Rabbanon. It's on Lamed Beis, 3 lines from the top. Lamed Beis Amid Aleph. Leave. Correct? Yeah, that's where we left off, right? Okay. The pasuk says, I was taught on the Brisa. Now, Uva Arain, the Brisa quotes a pasuk. Uva Arain al Oyal Mayed. So this is a pasuk in Parshas Achri Maish. And we'll just go through the order of the pasukim. So the way it starts off is Aaron will come into the holiest with the par, right? Par, then bakal lachatas, va'ayal la'ayla. And then it discusses how he brings the chatas. But before that, it says that he has to wear linen clothes when he comes in, and he rachatz b'mayim sorry elevation. Then it says that he brings the 2 goats. Then it says that he puts the ketairis in front of the kapairis. And he sprinkles the blood of the bull, that was the par. And he shechs the sir of the chatas. Okay, then they take away the sir lazazel. And then it says, Aaron al Oyal Mayur, Fasha the Spig Day Abad, Ashalabash Bavel, Kedish Vinicham Sham. Aaron comes to the tent of meeting, he takes off the clothing of linen that he wore when he went in, and he leaves them there. Brachatz Basari Bamayim, Bamakum Kadesh, Lavishas Begadav Yatsa Vasas Elasam. And then he does the Ayla. Okay. So what we learned was that after the whole ceremony of the Ketairos and the Avodah Sayoim, which is the par of the Ayel, then it says that he comes into the sanctuary. So the Gemara asks right away, Lama Uba, what's he doing in there at this time? He already did the Ketairos. He did the Ketairos. He sprinkled the blood already. He's coming in actually to remove the fire pan. Remember, he put the ketairos down. So who took out who cleaned it up? He put it down in a pan. Who came he did. He went back in to take it out. Now it says, Shekala Parsha. I'm sorry? You're right. Shekala Parsha Kul Nemra Ala Seder Chosmi Pasuk Zeh. This is out of order. This pasuk is out of order. My timer. How do you know that it's out of order? So Rav Chizda Gemiri, Rav Chizda says that we have a tradition. Chamish Tfilas Vasar Kedushin Tevel Kain Gadol Mekadosh B'Yayin. The Kain Gadol has to go to the mikveh 5 times and wash his hands 10 times. The Kasidran, but if it's in order, LeMishkachas Ala Shalish Tfilas Vashisha Kedushin. You only have 3 tfilas and 6 washing of the hands. Why? Because the ram, his ayel in the El Ha'am is done in Big Day Zav. The pasuk after this says that he does the ram. That's the pasuk after going into the sanctuary, going into the Kodesh Kodashim. So let me give you the whole order now, so it'll be clear. The first thing he does is he does the Karban Tamid in the morning. What clothing does he wear then? The gold clothing, the 8 garments. That's a regular service. It's not a special Yom Kippur Kodesh Kodashim service. So he wears. So before he did that, he it wasn't clear if he washed his hands before, but he definitely went to the mikveh and he washed his hands after. Right? There was machlekes yesterday, Reb Meir and the. Okay. Then he has to do the Avodah Sayyim. Avodah Sayyim is the par and the ayil. His par, right? His carbon chapas. He had to do that. So that he had to sprinkle the blood inside the Kodesh Kodashim. And he also had to do the Ketores. So he puts on his linen garment. So that's his first change of clothing. So he went to the mikveh now twice. Then the correct order would be he has to change his clothing and do the Oila, the Ayel and the El Ha'am. His Ayel and the El Ha'am. He has to do the Oila. But that is done outside. So he has to change back to the big day Zav. So now it's already 3. Then he has to go back in to get the fire pan. Oh, so he was wearing big day Zav. He has to go back into the Kodesh HaKodashim. He has to change again. They're holding by 4. Then when he comes out, he does the Karban Musaf and the Tamid Shel Bein Arbayim, which is regular Karbanas, which is big day Zav. So that's 5. Yes, to change back into the big day Zav. So that's his 5 changing of clothing, which gives me 5 tefillas. Every time he changed his clothing, went to the mikveh. Now here's the issue. If I read the psukim in order, so then the Avodah Sayyim, which was done in big day Lavan, and the removal of the fire pan was done without any changing of clothing in the mid-end at all, which is the way the psukim set it up, then he only changes his clothes 3 times because the whole center is big day Lavan. It's the ayel that he does before he takes out the fire pan that breaks it up, that he has to do 1 more change of clothing, which means he has to change back and forth, which is 2, which makes it into 5. So if I read the psukim in order, there's only going to be 3. So let me give you the English translation from this. How he puts the commentary in the thing. So when it says Uba Aaron el Ayel Mayed, which is the pasuk that we quoted, this is pasuk Chav Gimel. So it has a whole introduction. It says Aaron must then change into his regular high priestly garments and sacrifice the 2 ascent offering rams, and burn up the fat parts of the 2 sin offerings, as we will describe presently. After that, and now it starts to translate, Aaron must change back into the linen garments, enter the tent of the meeting, and proceed again into the Holy of Holies in order to remove the spoon and pan that he had left there the first time he entered. He must then go to a designated place, remove the linen garments that he wore. Okay, so they added in the whole, in the commentary, they added it in. Okay. It will get clearer as we learn today, the order of the Avodah. So, we did Rav Chesda. I'm sorry?
Quick question.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the beginning and the end of the day were the Karban Tamid, and he wore the big day Zahav.
Exactly.
And in the exact middle, he had an Avodah with another animal.
Yeah.
And
He had his ram, which was his Oila, which is also big day Zav.
Right. So, and in between number 2 and number 4 were
Big day
just the
Lavan.
linen.
Yeah.
And did those involve animals?
So you have to sprinkle the blood inside the sanctuary, inside the Holy of Holies. So there was an animal there. That was the par and the ayel. Par and the soy. Par and the soy.
Number 4 was he had, if I heard it correctly, number 4 he had to remove the
fire pan.
How did it get there in the first place?
Oh, and the Ketores, I forgot. And the Ketores. So the sprinkling of the blood and the Ketores was done in number 2.
Uh-huh. So number 2 did involve an animal.
Right.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Okay. Now we're holding by Tanya, right? Tanya Amar Rabbi Yehuda. We had the Brisa, and we have Rav Chizda that explains that if we don't make it switch the order from the psukim, then we're going to be left with 3 and not 5, which 3 would only give us 6 for hand washings and not 10, what we need. Okay, Tanya Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda is not Rabbi. Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Lai. It's very important because we're going to have Rabbi's opinion soon. He says, Minayin l'chamish tefillas v'asara kiddushin shetayvel kain gadol mekadosh b'bayam. How do you know that there's 10 tefillas, 5 tefillas and 10 washing of the hands? It's Talmud Laimar. What's that sound? Oh, it says, "Uva arain el oyel maye dupasher espig de haba brachatz b'sarei b'mayim b'makom kodesh v'lomeshes b'gadav b'yatza v'asa."
Now that it's here, I know that I'm here.
Let's go back. Let's see what Rabbi Yehuda is telling us. This is mamish the beginning. No, I'm sorry. This is the pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda is telling me the pasuk that we just quoted. This is pasuk Chaf Gimel. So the pasuk says that Aaron enters into the Oyel Mayed and he removes the linen clothing that he wore when he went into the Kodesh and he leaves them there. Okay, in the quote it drops and he leaves them there, and it just goes on to tell me the main point. V'rachatz es b'sarei b'mayim. He washes his flesh in water, b'makom kadosh, in a holy place, v'lavash begadav, and then he puts on his clothing. The yotza v'asa, and he goes out and he does his oila in the oila sa'am. Okay. His oila was his ayel, his ram. Nailasam was also their ayel, El Ha'am. Okay, Halamadita, this teaches me, Shekala Mashanami Aveda Laveda Toin Tfila. What clothing is he changing here? He was wearing the big day lavan when he went into the oil mayad. He was wearing the
like he starts to go.
Yeah, this is number 4. This is no, because we're switching it. So we're switching it and we're saying that the pasuk didn't tell me, but it's talking about number 3. He's switching from number 2 to number 3. That's what the pasuk that we have to when we rearrange the pasuk. He's switching from number 2 to number 3. So that means he's taking off the big day lavan and he's putting on the big day zav because he's going to do his ram. Okay. So what do we see? That when you switch from big day lavan to big day zav, you have to go to the mikvah. That's what we see from Rabbi Yehuda. I'm a Rebbe. I'm sorry. You have to go to the mikvah. I'm a Rebbe. Rebbe says, Rebbe has his own lima. He says, how do you know that you have to go to the mikvah 5 times and wash your hands 10 times? Shenemar, this is at the beginning. This is the first pasuk, not the first pasuk, but the first avodah. When it starts to say, this is pasuk Daled. It says that he wears linen clothing, and he has to wash his flesh in water and put them on. That means he was wearing the big day zav from service number 1, the tamid. He has to do service number 2, so he puts on the linen garments. So Rebbe tells me that from the change of clothing from gold to linen, you have to go to the mikvah. Halamadita, What do we see? Shekala Mashanim Avodah Avodah Torah and Tefillah. V'Omer, and it also says, this is strange to do this because he's re-quoting a few words from the pasuk that he quoted already. Big Day Kaideshem, that they are holy garments. Now it says they are. What's the they? The linen or the gold? So it says, this tells me that all the garments are holy. They're comparable one to the other. Now, just to point out, so the Gemara will be easier later, Rabbi Yehuda taught me that from Big Day Lavan to Big Day Zav, I have to wash. Rebbe teaches me from Big Day Zav to Big Day Lavan, I have to wash. And Rebbe also tells me another pasuk that compares the begadim together. Okay. Then he says, Chamish Avodah same. There's 5 services. Now, this is where the Gemara gives us a chart. It's not in a chart, but it's
Chartable.
right, chartable. It goes like this. Tamid Shal Shachar, the Big Day Zav. The morning Tamid, that was in the regular daily offering, that was done in golden clothing. It means the 8 garments that the Kohen Gadol has, which means that he has the breastplate and the other garments that have gold in them. The ephod. Okay. Avodah Sayyim, we're up to number 2. The Big Day Lavan. What was Avodah Sayyim? That was the par and the sar that he brought as an atonement. The bull and the goat. And the second goat got pushed away, but that pushed off but that was the Avodah Sayyim, special Avodah of Yom Kippur. That was Big Day Lavan. Eloi ve'el ha'am, his ram, this was an Ayla, oh thank you. His ram and the ram of the people, that was the Big Day Zav. That was not done inside the sanctuary. That was number 3. Kafu machta, this is what we introduced, that he has to go in to be able to take the fire pan out. That was the Big Day Lavan. He had to go inside. He put it in down before. He had to go take it out. This was number 4. And then Tamid Shal Bein Arbaim, the Big Day Zav. And then the conclusion was in gold garment. All set? Okay, so basically 1 and 5 is the Karban Tamid. 2 and 4 is Big Day Lavan, putting down the Ketores and then taking the fire pan out with some blood in the first one. And the middle one is Big Day Zav. It's the ram, which is brought as an Ayla. The 2 rams brought as an Ayla. Now, it says, Minayin shekol tvila tzricha shnei kedushim. How do you know every time you go to the mikveh, you have to wash your hands? Twice. Talmud Laimar, the pasuk says, Upashat v'rachatz v'lavash. Now, if you go back to the pasuk that Rabbi Yehuda quoted, not Rabbi. All of this is Rabbi. You go back to Rabbi Yehuda's pasuk. It says, "Ufashat." This big de'aban. V'rachatz. Sorry about mine. V'lavash. That's begad. Okay, so that tells me that he takes off the clothing. He goes to the mikveh and he puts on the clothing again. Now, what Rebbe does to this is he says that berachatz is going on both the ufashat and the lavash. That means he has to wash his hands. Berachatz, he's translating as washing his hands. Goes one for the in other words, if I don't have a comma, theoretically I could put the comma. Berachatz b'sari b'mayim. Ufashat is big diaba, the berachatz b'sari b'mayim v'akum kadosh, comma. That means I have to go wash my hands together with removing the clothing. And then I have another way of reading it. I could read it. Berachatz b'sari b'mayim v'akum kadosh v'lavash. I go to the mikveh and get dressed. So where does it go? So I have those 2 readings. Rabbi says that they tell me that one is, I do it both. I do it. I wash my hands with the removing of the clothing, and I wash my hands with the putting on of the clothing. Now, if you notice, the verachatz comes after the removing of the clothing, and it also comes before the putting on the clothing. So according to Rebbe, the washing of the hands is done undressed. Both washing of the hands is done undressed. That's interesting. We didn't have that before. We had an opinion of Reb Meir that said that you wash your hands after you undress, before you go to the mikveh. Then you go to the mikveh, get dressed, and then wash your hands afterwards. But no one said before that both washings were done undressed. This is the first time we're seeing it. Okay. So we were asking, where do you see that you have twice washing of the hands? Rebbe says you see it from upashat v'lavash, verachatz v'lavash.
There's no brachas for any of these washings.
Ooh. I'm sure there's a bracha. Dr. Stein asked if he says a bracha when he washes his hands. I'm sure he does.
But now 9 o'clock is what I'm dressed.
That's a problem.
You know, you say, excuse.
You guys the first time.
It's possible that he would say the bracha. Did he say a bracha when he went to the mikveh? It's possible that he could say the bracha before he got undressed, and then get on without interruption, and then get undressed, wash his hands. I'm making it up. The bracha on the mikveh, they say a bracha in the mikveh. That's okay because there's water. The water is I guess it's considered covered. You go like this. They say a bracha, like there should be a separation between the heart and the erva. Yeah, but just to stand there, how does he wash his hand? I'm not sure. Okay. So Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon Aimer. Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon has a different shot, and where we know that he has to wash his hands. So it's kal v'chaimer. I have a kal v'chaimer, he says. Ma b'makom shein tan tefillah kiddush. On a regular day, you don't really need to go to the mikveh when you come into the Beis Hamikdash. We said that you do go to the mikveh, but that was just rabbinic. That was Rabbi Yehuda said srach tefillah. You wanted to make sure that you thought about if you were tamei, but you always had to wash your hands. So if on a regular day you don't need to go to the mikveh, but you need to wash your hands, makom shatan tefillah in a din shatan kiddush. If I need to go to the mikveh, for sure I need to wash my hands. You see how pure you need to be. You need to even go to the mikveh. So for sure you need to wash your hands. The Gemara says 1 second. That would only tell me that I have to wash my hands once. We need a double washing. We need to wash twice. You go to the mikveh 5 times, that means you have to wash your hands 10 times. According to Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, it would only be 5. Well, yeah. Maybe you're saying it would only be. No, it would be 5. If we're learning like this. If when I don't need to go to the mikveh, I need to wash my hands. When I do need to go to the mikveh, which is every time he changes his clothes, he has to wash his hands. So it would be only 5. The Gemara says no. Talmud Laimar, the pasuk says, "Uva Aaron el oyel mayed ufasher espig de abada shalavash." And Aaron comes into the oyel mayed and he takes off the linen clothing that he was wearing. Ma Talmud Laimar shalavash. Why does it say that he was wearing? Klamadim paishid elamash shalavash. Can you take off clothing that you weren't wearing? What does it mean that it? So elalahakish pshita lilavisha. It's coming to tell me a comparison. Taking off clothing to getting dressed. Malavisha Tom Kiddush, Afchita Tom Kiddush, just like for getting undressed. Just like for getting dressed, you have to wash your hands. So for getting undressed, you have to wash your hands. So he has 10. He adds it the extra one from the Asher Lavash. The Pasha together Asher Lavash. That tells me that he has to wash the hands twice. So we have Rebbe's washing the hands twice. That was from Virachatz. He doubled the Virachatz by not putting a comma in, so you can read it two ways. Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon has it from the Kal V'Chaimer plus the Lavash. Okay. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. We're going back now to discuss the first brisa that we quote, not the first brisa, the second brisa that we quoted today. We said Tanya I'm Rabbi Yehuda on the top, Minayin L'Chamash Tfilas. So we re-examine that now. And I mentioned while we were learning it that we learned that you need to use the mikveh only from taking off the white garments and putting on the gold garments. That's what's going to be our discussion. Rabbi Yehuda says, how do you know that there's 5 mikvahs and 10 washing of the hands that the Kohen Gadol has to do on this day? Aaron comes in the tent of meeting and he washes his flesh in the holy place. Because that pasuk said by Yova Aaron, we skipped that he takes off the big day habad, the linen clothing, and so he takes off the linen clothing. He has to go to the mikveh. Okay. The Gemara says, "Ashkechan mi big day love and the big day zav." I find that this is a limud. This is teaching me something from taking off the linen clothes to putting on the golden clothes. That's what the pasuk is referring to. But mi big day zav, the big day love and minayin. How do you know the opposite? How do you know you have to go to the mikveh when you take off the golden clothes and put on the linen clothes? Where it says Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, you turn the page. I'm starting the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel, Kal V'Chaimer. We have a Kal V'Chaimer. Ma big day zav shein kain gadol nichnas b'em l'fnei b'lifnim ton tefillah. If when I'm putting on the golden clothing, the 8 garments, the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to wear them when he goes into the Holy of Holies. It means it's not such a high level. But nevertheless, before you put them on, you have to go to the mikveh. And by their time, tefillah, big day love on shenichnas b'em l'fnei b'lifnim in a din shetan tefillah. Is it not a Kal V'Chaimer? The big days of, which is not the holiest, because I can't wear them inside to the holies. I have to, before I put them on, I have to go to the mikveh. So if I am putting on the big day lavan, which I wear into the holy, for sure I should have to go to the mikveh before. Rabbi Yehuda says I have a Kal V'Chaimer. 1 second. It's not a perfect Kal V'Chaimer. You can ask a question. Mala big days of, shkein kaprasim meruba. Big days of, I know I can't wear it inside, but it's worn so often for so many atonements that maybe we should say that that's actually a holier level. And the reason why I have to go to the mikveh when I put on the big days of is because kaprasim meruba. It has atonement for all the different sacrifices is all done. It carries a big load. So that's why you go to the mikveh before that. Who says you have to go to the mikveh before big day lavan? He learns it actually from Rebbe. What we just said is that Rabbi Yehuda, that tells me that I have to wash, I have to go to the mikveh when I put on my big day zav. How do you know the big day lavan? So he also holds up Rebbe's limud, which was Ksainis Bat Kodesh Yilbash, that tells me when I take off the golden clothes and put on the linen clothes that I go to the mikveh in the middle. So in other words, they're not exclusive, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi. Rabbi Yehuda teaches me from linen to gold, I have to go to the mikveh. Rabbi teaches me from gold to linen, I have to go to the mikveh. We ask the question, where does Rabbi Yehuda know from gold to linen? We say, okay, he learns from Rabbi, he accepts Rabbi. See, Beryl, are you traveling over there? Are you going on a trip or no? Okay, now I was just wondering if anyone on the bus is. Okay. I'm a Rebbe. Now we go back to discuss the brisa that Rebbe said. We already discussed Rabbi Huda. We had two prices before, Rabbi Huda and Rebbe. Rabbi Huda, of course, is Rabbi Huda Rabbi Loi. Rebbe is Rabbi Huda Anasi. Don't confuse them. Now we just go back to that price. I'm a Rebbe. This is going to sound very familiar because we said this on the page before. How do you know that there's 5 mikvahs and 10 washing of the hands that the Kohen Gadol does on Yom Kippur? Talmud Leimer, Ksenis Bat Kodesh Yilbash, he puts on his linen clothing. Like we said, you take off the gold and put on the linen, you have to go to the mikvah. Anyone that changes has to go to the mikvah. I find that from the golden clothes to the linen clothes, you have to go to the mikvah. Big day lavan or big day zav minayin. What about the other way? From linen to gold. Who says, how do you know that you have to go to the mikvah? Now, it would be symmetrical if it would say, well, he learned it from Rabbi Huda, which is what we did with Rabbi Huda. If we asked the other way, he said, well, he learned from Rabbi. But the Gemara doesn't do that. The Gemara says, well, let's start with Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel. So far, it is symmetrical. Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel, Kal v'chaymer. We have a Kal v'chaymer. The only thing is exactly the opposite. Ma big day lavan shein kaparas meruba. When it comes to the linen garments, over there, Rabbi said that you have to go to the mikveh before you put on the linen garment. So, if before I put on the linen garments, I have to go to the mikveh. Now, the linen garments, it's not kaparas meruba. It doesn't have a lot of the sacrifices that it's worn with. But nevertheless, tune and tefillah, I have to go to the mikveh. Big day zav, shekapras meruba, in a din shetan tefillah. Big day zav. That's the big atonement. For sure I should have to go to the mikveh before I put it on. So, Rabbi only has to teach me one way. He only has to tell me that before you put on the pasuk only needs to tell me before I put on the linen garments, I go to the mikveh. If I do that, then for sure before I put on the golden garments, I have to go to the mikveh. Says 1 second, it's not necessarily a real Kal v'chaymer because maybe the reason why before you put on the linen garments you have to go to the mikveh because that's really holy. You wear that into the Kodesh Kodashim, but the big day zav, no. So you don't have a compelling Kal v'chaymer here. Gemara says, "Hainu diktani va'omer big day Kodashim barachatz." Okay. If you remember Rebbe's brisa, I'm a Rebbe. We said over here, after he quotes the pasuk, he says, "Va'aymer," another pasuk, big day kaidashem. The garments are holy. And we said that it was a little odd because he's re-quoting the pasuk that he quoted before. And he's saying Va'aymer and another pasuk. Usually you don't do that. Usually if you say another pasuk, first of all, the Gemara attacks you and says, why do I need another pasuk? You have the first one. That's why are you bringing other pasukim? And also you already said the pasuk. So it is zooming into it. So, but what's happening here is that Rebbe says, big day kodesh haim, they are holy garments. He's removing the big day zav and putting on the big day lavan. And what does it say? And he goes to the mikveh. Big day kodesh haim, they are holy garments. What is they are, haim? The big day lavan or the big day zav? So Rebbe says, they're compared one to another. That means that I have to go to the mikveh before I put on the big day zav, and I also have to go to the mikveh before I put on the big day lavan. So Rebbe doesn't need to tell me that I'm going to learn from Rabbi Yehuda. I'm going to learn the way Rabbi Yehuda did it. That he said from Big Day Lavan to Big Day Zav. No. Rabbi says, I learned from Big Day Zav to Big Day Lavan. How do you know the other way? Big Day Lavan to Big Day Zav. How do you know that? It says Big Day Kedeshim. They're all holy. Okay.
Hey.
Hey.
It's a lot.
Someone's been learning Chassidus here. Okay. So let's see. We're up to the Chamish Avodas. There are 5 Avodas. Now we're continuing in the Brisa that we quoted before, and we're examining 5 services. Tamid Shel Shachar, number 1. That's the Big Day Zav. Avodas Hayom, the special service of the day, which is the par and the sar, and the Ketairas, Big Day Lavan. That's the linen garments. Eloi ve'el ha'am, the 2 rams that were oiless. That's the Big Day Zav. That was done outside. That's in gold. Kafa Machta, the Big Day Lavan. Number 4 was removing the fire pan. It was white. And Tamid Shel Ben Abayim, number 5 is the Big Day Zav. Minayin shekol tefillah tzricha beis kedushin. How do you know that every time you went to the mikveh you had to wash your hands twice? Talmud Laimar ufashatz berachatz berachatz v'lavash. We're saying that by not putting the comma in, and it only says berachatz once, but we're saying is that ufashat berachatz, and then we're going to read it berachatz v'lavash. That this is a requote of Rebbe. Now this says, one second. You're telling me that you have to wash twice because it says berachatz. Berachatz, hay b'tefillah ksiv. That means go to the mikveh. That doesn't mean wash your hands. What's the actual pasuk? Actual pasuk says, berachatz b'sarei b'mayim. Wash his flesh in water. It sounds like the mikveh. The Gemara says, I mean, in the tefillah, they're not going big. They quite the same today in the kiddush. Rebbe already knows that he would go to the mikveh because they have the other pasuk that says, "Kseinas bad kodesh yolbash, u'mechnesei bad yoel b'sarei, v'avnei bad yachkor, mitzafes bad yitznei, big day kodeshim, berachatz b'mayim es b'sarei elevation." Rebbe already knows how to go to the mikveh from pasuk Gimel. What do I need? The berachatz, the ufashat, the berachatz, the lavash of pasuk Chaf Gimel, Rabbi Yehuda's pasuk. That is telling me that I have to wash my hands. The Gemara asks, so why doesn't it say Kaddish, that you should wash your hands? Hakamash Malon, the Tefillah Kiddush. It's coming to teach me that even though I'm washing my hands, but it's coming to tell me how I go to the mikveh. That's why it's using the word berachatz when it's teaching me about washing the hands. Ma kiddush b'makom kaddish. Just like when I wash my hands, it has to be in the holy place. After makom kaddish, also the mikveh needs to be in the holy, in the hazara, in the courtyard. Now, Rabbi Yehuda kiddush minole. Rabbi just used Rabbi Yehuda's pasuk, which he says is extra, which was totally extra because Rebbe had a self-contained, his whole limud was just from his one pasuk that he had. And he uses Rebbe Yehuda's pasuk to tell me that that's extra, so that tells me that he has to wash his hands. But how does Rebbe Yehuda know that you have to wash his hands? Well, Nafkalei Mid Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. Rebbe Yehuda joins up with Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon that said before, a kal v'chaimer. He says, if when I don't need to go to the mikveh, I need to wash my hands. When I do need to go to the mikveh, for sure I need to wash my hands. That was the kavachem. So Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon will join. Okay. Amar Rav Chizda, as we pointed out before. Rav Chizda comes along and he points out this nuance here, which is unique. He says, "Ha the Rebbe mafka mid Reb Meir or mafka mid Rabbanan." The teaching of Rebbe is different than Reb Meir, and it's also different than the Rabbanan. Mafka mid Rabbanan. You see, we started the second one. I don't know. I'm not sure why, but it's different than the Rabbanan. Dila Rabbanan Amri Kshulavash Mekadesh. The Rabbanan say all of the washing of the hands was always when you're dressed. This is easier for us to, because we always wash our hands after the mikveh. You get dressed and you wash your hands. So everything is done when you're dressed. Before you go to the mikveh, you're dressed and you wash your hands. And when you come out, you get dressed and wash your hands. And Rebbe says that when you're undressed, you wash your hands. However, it's also different than Reb Meir that also said that you wash your hands when you're undressed. Why? Even Reb Meir that says you wash your hands when you're undressed before you go into the water, but he said that when you wash your hands the second time, that's after you come out of the water and get dressed, you wash your hands. But Rebbe says, you get out of the water and you wash your hands. So in the mikveh for the Kohen Gadol, according to Rebbe, the sink was not in the changing room. The sink was right outside the water, outside the pool. Yeah, we have to tell the people over there that build the temple, what's it called, institute, it's going to be complicated because they have to follow all the different opinions, put different basins in.
Who says there was a sink? Wasn't the procedure that his hands went on his feet, which
Yeah.
means someone else had to pour the water, right?
He used the kiyar.
If he went to the kiyar, but
using the kiyar.
otherwise, didn't another Kohen pour the water on his hands and feet?
I think he would do. Did he have to do all together? No, I thought he would do one, like hand and foot and hand and foot.
So you're saying he poured it himself?
I guess, unless I see that it says differently.
Okay.
Does it say clearly then that someone else poured? If someone else poured, then you could do it all together.
No, because I've seen a drawing, which means someone else's idea of what it was.
That is a commentary. The picture is a commentary. Yeah. I like the picture Haggadahs. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. Amar Ravacha Bar Yaakov. Ravacha Bar Yaakov says, Hakol Meidim Mekiddush Sheni Shalei V'Shvach Kach Mekadosh. Ravacha Bar Yaakov says, everyone agrees that the second washing was done when he's dressed. My time. Where do you see this from? The Makra Begishtem El Mizbeach, or when he comes close to the altar, Mishein Mechusar Legisha. Over there it says that he has to. What does it say? He has to wash. He has to be clean when he comes close to the altar. What's the full pasuk?
Whenever they come to the tent of meeting, they should wash with water and not die. When you approach the altar to serve, to burn a fire offering. That's the English.
Uh-huh.
In Exodus 30:20.
20. That's the beginning of yeah, it's by the kiyar. In the parsha of the kiyar, it says that Aaron and his sons will wash their hands and their feet. When they come to the tent of meeting, they should wash with food and water, not die, or when they come close to Mizbeach to serve. So, because it says when they come close to the Mizbeach to serve, Ravacha Bar Yaakov says, Misha Eina Mechusar Al Gisha. When they come close to the Mizbeach to serve, they have to wash their hands first. That's saying that the only thing that he needs to do is come close. Yatzazeshem Mechusar Levisha Vigisha. But this person, he needs to get dressed and come close. It doesn't say that you wash them. It says you wash before you come close. That means first you have to get dressed, you're adding in another activity if you have to get dressed. And it doesn't say that you washed with, with something that you have to do beforehand. Amali Rav Acha Brei Rav Rav Ashi, Rav Acha Brei Rav says to Rav Ashi, Lei Rav Chisda Slei Rav Acha, Lei Rav Acha Slei Rav Chisda. He doesn't fit with what we were learning before from Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says that Rebbe is different than the Rabbanan and Rav Meir. Dimkein the Rebbe have a Luchamesa Kedushin. If we're going to accept Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, according to Rebbe, he's going to have to wash his hands 15 times. Because Rebbe says that you get undressed, wash your hands, go to the mikveh, come out, wash your hands, get dressed, and throw in Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. And after you're dressed, you have to wash your hands again. That's going to be, with 5 mikvahs, that's going to be 15 times. That's going to be too much.
If you want to know why we're so OCD.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's leave the Gemara here.
No more washing hands? Oh,
Yeah,